I saw coverage of an interesting art exhibit in Chicago recently, sitting in Daley Plaza in the heart of the city. It's called the Metro Gun Share Program. It's a collaborative installation from two organizations, the Escape Pod, which is a local advertising agency, and the Brady Center to Prevent Gun Violence, a DC-based gun control lobbying group. The exhibit is a row of 10 replica AR-15 rifles meant to mimic a bike share program, a display the creators hope will send a message about how disturbingly easy it is for a citizen to acquire an assault weapon. About as easy as renting a bike, they say. Yeah, well, if it's really that easy, why are they using replica rifles? Why not use real rifles? The answer, of course, is that both the open carry and the transfer of those rifles would be violations of Illinois state law. Violations of law that wouldn't exist if you were simply sharing a bicycle. But don't let the facts disrupt the artsy narrative. Chicago is an interesting place to put a public lecture about gun control. The city has long been at the forefront of infringing upon the Second Amendment. In 1982, the city banned handgun possession altogether, a law that stood for decades until the Supreme Court struck it down as unconstitutional in 2010. And it wasn't until 2013 that the state of Illinois allowed concealed carry. It was the last state in the union still trying to ban it entirely until the courts reminded them of that pesky Bill of Rights. Even today, Illinois is one of the stricter states in firearm regulation. You need a FOID card just to buy a gun in Illinois. That's a state-issued permit, and it can take up to 2 months to get one. And even when you do get yours, you'll still have a waiting period of 24 hours to buy long guns, 72 hours to buy handguns. And despite all of these restrictions, Chicago is perpetually among the 10 worst cities in the country for murder rate. The question these conflicting premises create is obvious, and it's a question the art exhibit itself has to answer. Why does Chicago have so many gun deaths when Illinois has some of the country's toughest gun laws? Yeah, tough question, so get your hula hoops out, because you're going to have to come up with some kind of sideshow to explain this. Because it's everyone else's fault, obviously. Illinois isn't an island in an ocean. Our neighboring state of Indiana has some of the laxest gun control laws. That means that Illinois' sensible gun control laws cannot possibly be effective. And this is an argument you'll hear all the time. David Hogg repeated it at a speaking event last week in LA.
It's almost like they're using Chicago and these different places as case examples, and they don't want to do anything there because they want to be able to point to that and be like, look, gun control doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because it's not at a federal level. Places like Chicago get their guns from different states. In DC, when I was talking to Zion Kelly, whose brother Zaire was killed a couple of months ago, he spoke at the march too. The gun that killed his brother came from a different state. DC has strict gun laws as well, but if we don't have this at a federal level to address this through the Supremacy Clause, we're never going to be able to address this at a national level, and we're never going to be able to fix it.
On a surface level, this argument might sound plausible. Yeah, maybe people are just going to other states to buy guns, in much the same way you might go to another state to avoid sales tax or to get a better deal on something in any number of ways. But this argument has fatal flaws. It's just flat out wrong, both legally and theoretically. So if we ever hear this case made, it should be dismissed immediately. First, this argument rests upon a poor understanding of the law. The behavior they're describing, just easily transferring firearms across state lines, that's actually illegal, and it's far more difficult to do that legally than they're describing. And second, if easy access to guns means gun violence, why aren't those neighboring states the violent ones instead of Illinois and Chicago? To the first point, per federal law, you can't just go into a gun shop in a state where you don't live and walk out with a gun. Under the Gun Control Act of 1968, the only people who can legally transfer firearms across state lines are licensed dealers and manufacturers. Any store in the business of dealing guns has what's called a federal firearms license, or FFL. If you want to transfer a gun from one state to another, you must do it from FFL dealer to FFL dealer. If you're a Chicago resident, for example, and you go to an Indiana gun shop to buy a gun, that shop is not going to let you walk out with the gun. That shop will instead ship the gun to an FFL dealer in your state, and that dealer will apply all of your state's laws before you get the firearm. And that's not just true for stores. Even if you want to get a gun from a private individual in another state, you still need to transfer that firearm through FFL FFL dealers. So let's say I want to give one of my guns to someone in Chicago right now for free. To do that legally, I would have to go to a Montana FFL dealer and have them ship that gun to an FFL dealer in Illinois, who will apply all of Illinois' state laws in making that transfer. And that's the only way to transfer the gun legally. Anything else is illegal gun trafficking in violation of federal law, carrying penalties in the form of fines, imprisonment, or both. Bottom line, there is no legal way to get a gun as an Illinois state resident without following Illinois state law. But let's ignore that legal reality for a moment. Let's ignore the fact that what they're describing is already illegal. And let's say it wasn't. Let's say it's totally fine for a Chicago resident to drive over to Gary, Indiana, and walk out of a shop with a gun and drive straight back to Chicago. This argument rests upon a simple foundational premise that easy access to guns means more violence. That's why Chicago is so violent, after all. It's so easy to get a gun immediately nearby. Well, if that's true, if easy access to guns means more violence, why aren't those neighboring states with relaxed gun laws more violent than Illinois and Chicago? According to this scorecard from the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, Illinois is doing great with a B+ grade on gun control laws. The states immediately bordering Chicago, Indiana and Wisconsin, they both score far worse with much less strict laws. And yet Indiana and Wisconsin both have lower violent crime rates and they have lower murder rates than Illinois, a trend that's true year after year after year, with rare exception. If it's ease of access to guns in Indiana and Wisconsin causing Chicago violence, why isn't it causing violence in Indiana and Wisconsin? Because the argument is bunk. That's why. It's an argument that's not aligned with current law, and it's an argument that's not aligned with crime data. It's a surface-level scramble to try to explain away the obvious truth that gun control does not correlate with violent crime reduction. It's an attempted easy answer to a complex problem, but if you hear it, it's one that you can dismiss immediately. What you're talking about is already against the law federally. And if you think that relaxed Indiana laws make Chicagoans violent, you need to explain why they don't make Indianans violent too. Until you can do that, carry on with your factually challenged art exhibit arguments. The art may be up for interpretation, but the facts of the matter are not. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel always. Appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.